October 3, 1986. Deep in the North Atlantic, 190 kilometers northeast of Bermuda, the Soviet ballistic missile submarine K-219 patrolled the icy waters, carrying 16 nuclear-armed, liquid-fueled missiles. The crew moved through the vessel with routine precision, each man aware of the stakes of the Cold War, secrecy, and the sheer destructive power at their fingertips. But beneath the calm, disaster was brewing in silence. In Missile Tube 6, a submerged seal failed. Seawater rushed in, touching the volatile liquid fuel inside the missile. The reaction was instantaneous and terrifying. Heat and toxic gases surged through the compartment. Alarm sirens screamed. The weapons officer, Alexander Petrachkov, tried to vent the tube to the sea, but the chemical reaction escalated faster than anyone could intervene. By 05:38, a deafening explosion ripped through the forward missile compartment, killing 2 sailors instantly, with a third succumbing to poisonous gas moments later. The submarine shuddered violently, hull panels groaning as seawater flooded in, dragging the vessel down from 40 meters to over 300, a desperate struggle against the crushing pressure of the Atlantic depths. Chaos reigned inside K-219. Up to 25 sailors were trapped in a sealed section. Smoke and gas thickened, heat rose, and every control system flickered or failed. Captain Second Rank Igor Britanov acted swiftly, ordering hermetic sealing of compartments and damage control measures. Electrical systems failed, fires spread, and the submarine became a pressure cooker of metal, fuel, and human fear. Then came the reactors. Despite the automated safety systems, the nuclear cores did not shut down. Lieutenant Nikolai Belikov entered the reactor compartment, straining to follow procedures under suffocating heat and gas. Exhaustion forced him to retreat before completing the shutdown. A young seaman, Sergei Preminin, stepped forward. Alone, wearing only a full-face gas mask, he fought through smoke and overwhelming heat to finish the shutdown of the second reactor. He had succeeded, averting a nuclear catastrophe, but as he tried to exit, a fire-created pressure trap sealed the door. Preminin died inside the reactor compartment, a silent hero who saved the world at the cost of his own life. With the reactors stabilized, Britanov surfaced K-219 on battery power alone, but the ordeal was far from over. Poisonous gases and flooding in aft compartments made the submarine uninhabitable. He ordered his crew to evacuate onto a towing freighter, remaining aboard himself as the vessel drifted helplessly. Attempts to tow the submarine back to port failed. By October 6th, after nearly 3 days of desperate struggle, K-219 finally sank into the Hatteras abyssal plain, over 6,000 meters beneath the waves, taking its full complement of nuclear missiles with it. The aftermath was a tense mix of heroism, bureaucratic blame, and Cold War politics. Preminin was posthumously honored as a hero of the Russian Federation. Captain Britanov faced charges of negligence, sabotage, and treason, but was eventually cleared. His decisive actions ultimately recognized. The story of K-219 would be immortalized in the book and film Hostile Waters, though controversy followed the dramatization. The U.S. Navy, firmly denying any collision with K-219, emphasized that the disaster was entirely an onboard malfunction, a terrifying reminder of how close the world had come to nuclear disaster. K-219's story is the stuff of nightmares. A submarine, deep in the Atlantic, transformed into a floating inferno and tomb, its nuclear missiles a silent threat beneath the waves. Courage, quick thinking, and self-sacrifice prevented a catastrophe that could have changed history, even as the ocean claimed the vessel and some of its bravest souls. In 2011, the quiet town of Allende in Coahuila, Mexico, became the stage for one of the most horrifying episodes in the country's ongoing battle with drug cartels. Allende had always been a small, close-knit community where daily life revolved around family, local traditions, and the routines of rural living. But in the summer of that year, the town was thrust into a nightmare of unimaginable violence. The Los Zetas cartel, one of Mexico's most ruthless criminal organizations, arrived with a single, terrifying purpose of revenge. Believing that the residents of Allende had betrayed them by leaking information to the DEA, the cartel set out to punish the town in the most extreme and indiscriminate way possible. What followed was catastrophic. Dozens, possibly hundreds of townspeople were kidnapped, killed, and burned. Entire families vanished without a trace. Homes were set on fire. Streets became empty as fear took over, and the ordinary rhythms of life were replaced by a pervasive sense of dread. This was not a targeted assassination. It was a wholesale campaign of terror designed to send a message. Betrayal would not be tolerated, and those who opposed Los Zetas would face annihilation. Survivors described streets littered with abandoned homes and the suffocating presence of fear that made even leaving one's house feel dangerous. Families were torn apart. Some never knew the fate of their loved ones, while others were forced to witness horrors that would remain with them forever. The Allende massacre is particularly infamous because of its scale and indiscriminate cruelty. Unlike many other incidents of cartel violence, which target rivals or specific individuals, this attack engulfed entire communities. It demonstrated the power and impunity of Los Zetas, who operated as though the law, morality, and human life were entirely irrelevant. The massacre left a permanent scar on the region not only physically, in burned homes and abandoned properties, but psychologically, in the fear and trauma experienced by those who survived. Generations of residents would grow up hearing stories of neighbors who simply vanished, of families that were erased overnight, and of a town that was almost wiped off the map. The tragedy of Allende also reflects a broader reality of the Mexican drug war. Ordinary people often bear the brunt of violence that is fundamentally political and economic. Cartels such as Los Zetas do not limit their actions to competition with rival gangs. They extend terror to civilians, using fear as a tool to maintain control, punish perceived disloyalty, and demonstrate their dominance. In Allende, the consequences were devastating. The massacre shocked the nation, exposing the horrifying lengths to which criminal organizations could go, and the vulnerability of small communities caught in the crossfire. It highlighted how quickly life can change in areas controlled by organized crime. What was once a peaceful town became a symbol of chaos, brutality, and fear. While the massacre itself is over, its legacy continues. Survivors struggle with loss and trauma. Families remain fragmented. The memory of that summer in 2011 serves as a grim reminder of the human cost of cartel violence. Allende is more than just a footnote in news reports. It is a symbol of what can happen when lawlessness and extreme brutality collide, and when innocent communities are punished for crimes they may not have committed. The story of Allende stands as a chilling example of the ruthlessness of Los Zetas and a somber reminder of the fragility of safety in areas dominated by organized crime. It was November 11th, 2023 in Albania, when tragedy struck in front of stunned spectators. Rafael Dwamena, a 28-year-old Ghanaian forward known for his electrifying speed and powerful finishing, was representing KF Ignatia in a league match against FK Partizani. The game had barely reached the midway point of the first half when Dwamena suddenly collapsed on the field. One moment, he was sprinting into position, full of life and determination. The next, he was motionless on the grass. Teammates waved frantically for help. The referee halted play. Paramedics rushed in. But despite their desperate efforts, Rafael Dwamena was pronounced dead on the way to the hospital. The cause? Sudden cardiac arrest. For those who knew his story, the news hit like a punch to the gut. Dwamena wasn't just any player. He was a fighter, a man who had stared death in the face before and come back. Years earlier, doctors had discovered a dangerous heart condition that forced him to abandon a dream transfer to the English Premier League. He had even undergone surgery to have an implantable cardioverter defibrillator, an ICD, placed in his chest to regulate his heartbeat. That device once saved his life when he collapsed during a match in Austria. But somewhere along the way, Dwamena made a fateful decision. He had it removed. He wanted to play again, to feel the rush, to hear the crowd, to live the game that had defined his entire existence. Football was in his blood. Even as doctors warned him of the risks, Dlamini pressed on, returning to the pitch with the same passion that carried him from the dusty fields of Ghana to the bright lights of Europe. He had started in the Red Bull Ghana Academy, dazzling scouts with his raw speed and finishing ability. His journey took him to Austria, Switzerland, Spain, and Denmark, a roller coaster career marked by brilliance, heartbreak, and relentless perseverance. He had once been on the brink of Premier League glory. In 2017, Brighton and Hove Albion agreed to sign him from FC Zurich after he scored an astonishing 12 goals in just 18 matches. But during the medical exam, his world shattered. He failed due to a heart abnormality. What should have been his biggest break turned into a nightmare. Still, he refused to let the diagnosis define him. He moved to Levante in Spain's La Liga, then to Zaragoza on loan, and later to clubs in Denmark and Austria. Every time his heart condition returned to haunt him, he stepped away, and every time he came back, determined to reclaim his place on the field. His life was a battle between passion and mortality. In 2021, while playing in Austria, he collapsed mid-match but was revived when his ICD shocked his heart back to rhythm. It was a terrifying moment, a clear warning that the risk was real. But when he later signed with Ignatia in Albania, the dream called to him once more. He removed the device that had saved his life and decided to trust his body. He wanted to play without limits, without fear. And for a time, it seemed to work. He scored goals. He smiled again. Fans celebrated his resilience. When he found the net twice in a European qualifier for Ignatia in 2023, it felt like a redemption arc was unfolding, a man defying the odds, proving that courage could conquer fate. But fate had other plans. That November afternoon, as he lay on the pitch surrounded by medics, silence fell over the stadium. Players from both sides wept openly. The crowd watched in disbelief as the man who had fought so hard to keep playing was carried away for the final time. News of his death spread within hours, first across Albania, then throughout Europe, and finally back to Ghana, where he was beloved as a symbol of perseverance. The following day, football matches across Albania were postponed. Clubs, players, and fans around the world paid tribute to him. His teammates remembered not just his skill, but his spirit, the warmth he brought to the locker room, the hope he gave to others facing their own struggles. In February 2024, Raphael Dlamini was laid to rest on a football pitch in Accra, Ghana, the same kind of ground where his story began. Surrounded by family, friends, and fans, he was buried with his boots and his jersey, a man who lived and died for the game he loved. On April 10, 1963, the USS Thresher, a cutting-edge nuclear-powered attack submarine, descended into the deep waters off Cape Cod for a series of test dives that would prove fatal. On board were 129 people, Navy crew and shipyard personnel, confident in the submarine's modern systems and silent, sleek design. Thresher was the pride of the fleet, built to be fast, stealthy, and virtually untouchable, equipped with the latest sonar and weapon systems designed to hunt Soviet submarines in the tense shadow of the Cold War. But beneath the waves, the ocean had other plans. As the Thresher sank deeper during its trials, disaster struck silently. A failure in a silver-brazed pipe, designed to handle crushing pressures, allowed seawater to flood the submarine's engineering spaces. Electrical panels shorted. The nuclear reactor automatically shut down, cutting propulsion. The crew tried to surface, but every system seemed to betray them. The high-pressure air needed to blow. The ballast tanks had frozen, trapped in icy valves, leaving the sub powerless. Communications with the surface ship Skylark grew garbled, desperate. Minor difficulties. Have positive up angle, attempting to blow 900, then silence. Rescue ships raced to the area, but the Thresher had already vanished into the abyss. Even with sonar, deep-sea cameras, and the bathyscaphe Trieste, it took months to locate the wreckage nearly 8,400 feet below the surface. The submarine lay in shattered sections, spread across 33 acres, a haunting grave of twisted metal and lost lives. Investigators concluded that a single mechanical failure had cascaded into total catastrophe, an implosion that would have happened in moments, leaving no chance for survival. The loss of the Thresher sent shockwaves through the Navy and the world. It became a grim lesson in the fragility of even the most advanced technology, a stark reminder that beneath the ocean's surface, humanity is always vulnerable. The tragedy forced the U.S. Navy to overhaul submarine safety with the SubSafe program, ensuring that no failure, however small, would ever be taken lightly again. Yet, the memory of the Thresher remains chilling, a stark testament to the unforgiving depths and the invisible dangers lurking beneath the waves. In May 2012, a chilling discovery along a highway in Cadereyta Jimenez, Nuevo León, stunned Mexico and the world. Authorities found 49 mutilated bodies, 43 men and 6 women, dumped in black plastic bags beside the road. None of them had heads, hands, or feet, making identification nearly impossible. It was a scene straight out of a nightmare, the kind of violence that showed just how far Mexico's drug war had spiraled out of control. The Cadereyta Jimenez massacre was not just another cartel killing. It was a calculated act of terror, a grim message meant for everyone, including rival gangs, law enforcement, and ordinary citizens. Behind it all was the infamous Los Zetas cartel, one of the most feared criminal organizations in Mexico. The group, made up of former elite soldiers turned mercenaries, had built a reputation for turning brutality into a calling card. They did not just fight their enemies, they terrified them. The motive was part of a ruthless turf war between Los Zetas and their rivals, the Gulf Cartel, over control of smuggling routes that run through northern Mexico into the United States. Both groups wanted dominance over the same territory, and every massacre, kidnapping, and public display of violence became a twisted form of communication. In Cadereyta, that message was written not in words but in blood. Authorities initially found a banner at the scene claiming that the Gulf Cartel was responsible, but investigators quickly suspected it was a diversion. Los Zetas were notorious for planting false clues to confuse law enforcement and make their enemies look guilty. Over time, evidence and intelligence reports pointed strongly toward Los Zetas as the true perpetrators. What made the massacre especially horrifying was its scale and its anonymity. Because the victims had been so brutally disfigured, most of them could not be identified. Forensic experts worked tirelessly for months, using DNA testing to match what little evidence remained. Some victims were believed to be migrants from southern Mexico or Central America, people who were simply traveling north in search of a better life, caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. That revelation gave the massacre an even darker edge. It was not just a gang war. It was innocent lives erased for the sake of fear and power. The discovery sent shockwaves through Mexico. News channels broadcast the gruesome images, and the country was once again forced to confront the horrifying reality of the drug war that had claimed tens of thousands of lives. The government condemned the act and vowed to track down those responsible, but arrests were limited and convictions were few. Like many violent acts of the cartel wars, the Cadereyta massacre became another symbol of how deeply violence had taken root in the region. Beyond the immediate horror, the massacre also reflected a deeper issue, the breakdown of social order in parts of Mexico, where cartels had become the de facto authority. Towns lived in fear. Police forces were often outgunned, and civilians learned to stay silent. For many, Cadereyta was not just an atrocity, it was a warning that no one was truly safe. Years later, the incident still stands as one of the darkest moments in Mexico's modern history. It represents the point where brutality stopped being shocking and became disturbingly routine. The 49 victims of Cadereyta Jimenez remain a haunting reminder of what happens when power, greed, and impunity collide. Their identities may never all be known, but their deaths marked a grim chapter in the story of a nation still struggling to end its cycle of violence. It was June 26, 2003, a night that should have been another proud chapter in Cameroon's football history. The semi-final of the FIFA Confederations Cup was underway in Lyon, France. The crowd roared, the floodlights glowed, and in the middle of it all stood Marc-Vivien Foé-Tall, commanding and seemingly invincible, a warrior for his nation, the heart of Cameroon's midfield. But in the 72nd minute, something happened that silenced the world. Foe, without a single player near him, suddenly collapsed to the ground. No foul, no collision, just a man falling where he stood. For a moment, the crowd thought he had tripped, maybe cramped up, but he didn't move. His eyes stared blankly toward the sky as teammates screamed for help. Medical staff sprinted onto the pitch, desperately fighting against time. For 45 long minutes, doctors worked frantically to bring him back. CPR, oxygen, defibrillators, everything humanly possible was tried. Inside that stadium, thousands of fans waited in stunned silence, watching their hero's life slip away. When the announcement came that Marc-Vivien Foé had died, football itself seemed to stop breathing. He was only 28 years old. The autopsy would later reveal the cause of hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, a hereditary heart condition that silently kills even the strongest athletes. There were no warning signs, no second chances. The heart that had carried him through years of fierce battles on the field had suddenly betrayed him. What made this tragedy so haunting wasn't just that it happened during a major international match, or that it unfolded live before millions of viewers. It was the way Foé fell alone, unchallenged, as if fate itself had chosen that moment. His teammates were shattered. Opponents stood frozen, tears streaming down their faces. Thierry Henry, playing in the other semi-final that same night, pointed to the sky after scoring, dedicating his goal to Foé. In the days that followed, the football world united in grief. Manchester City retired his number 23 shirt. Lens and Lion withdrew the number 17 in his honor. Streets were renamed after him. Even years later, his name still echoes in the hearts of fans, a symbol of passion, dedication, and the cruel unpredictability of life. Foé wasn't just a player, he was a father, a husband, and a man who played every match with heart, quite literally, until the very end. His widow later revealed that he had been unwell before the game, suffering from stomach problems and exhaustion. But Foé had insisted on playing. Lion was his second home, and he wanted to perform in front of the fans who had embraced him. Even as his coach tried to substitute him, Foé waved him off, determined to continue. Minutes later, he was gone. He left behind a wife, children, and millions of grieving fans, but also a legacy that transcended sport. His son would later stand on the field before the 2009 Confederations Cup final, speaking briefly but powerfully in memory of his father, a man who gave everything for his country and his dream. Marc-Vivien Foé's death remains one of the most horrifying and heartbreaking moments in football history. It was a brutal reminder that even the strongest hearts can break, and sometimes they do it right in front of the world. On April 7, 1989, in the icy expanse of the Barents Sea, the Soviet experimental submarine K-278 Komsomolets faced a nightmare that every submariner fears but hopes never to meet. A titanium-hulled marvel of engineering, Komsomolets was designed to dive deeper than any American submarine, capable of withstanding pressures over 1,000 meters below the surface. It was a ghostly predator of the deep, carrying torpedoes armed with conventional and nuclear warheads, its sleek body a testament to Soviet ambition and technological audacity. Yet, on that fateful day, all of its power and promise became irrelevant against the invisible enemy that would strike from within. While submerged, moving silently through freezing waters about 180 kilometers southwest of Norway's Bear Island, a short circuit ignited a fire in the engineering compartment. The blaze spread through bulkhead cable penetrations, despite the crew's attempts to isolate it. Smoke, searing heat, and electrical failures crippled the submarine, and the temperatures inside soared to nearly 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. The reactor automatically shut down, propulsion was lost, and the vessel teetered on the brink of disaster. Panic and urgency gripped the crew as alarms blared, and the submarine, normally a fortress beneath the waves, became a suffocating, burning tomb. In a desperate bid to survive, the crew executed an emergency ballast blow. 11 minutes after the fire began, Komsomolets broke the surface, giving the sailors a fleeting chance at life in the open sea. Distress signals went out, and many abandoned ship, plunging into the near-freezing Haida-Sea waters. The sea, calm in appearance, was lethal. Hypothermia quickly became a silent killer. Others clung to life rafts, fighting waves, exhaustion, and the bitter cold, knowing that rescue was their only hope. For hours, Komsomolets floated like a wounded leviathan. The fire continued to rage, fed by the very air systems designed to keep the crew alive, turning survival inside into a deadly gamble. Then, hours later, the submarine slipped beneath the waves, vanishing into the abyss at a depth of 1,180 meters, taking with it the lives of those who had not yet escaped. Only 27 of the 69 aboard survived. Many perished in the freezing waters, others in injuries sustained during the fire or the sinking, and the commanding officer, Captain First Rank Evgeny Vanin, went down with his vessel. The Komsomolets sank with its secrets intact. 8 standard torpedoes and 2 nuclear warhead-armed torpedoes resting on the ocean floor, silent witnesses to the chaos above. Rescue efforts faced brutal conditions. Aircraft dropped life rafts, but wind and waves rendered many useless. Only a floating fish factory, arriving more than an hour after the sub sank, was able to save the survivors clinging desperately to life. The aftermath was both technical and human. The wreck, lying a mile and a half beneath the waves, became a focus of environmental concern. Expeditions revealed minor radioactive leakage from one of the nuclear torpedoes, prompting efforts to seal the wreck with special jelly-like compounds designed to last decades. Meanwhile, the human cost left a scar on the Navy and the nation. Every year on April 7th, submariners lost at sea are remembered, their courage in the face of unimaginable terror honored. When discussing the extreme violence of Mexico's drug cartels, few cases are as disturbing or as emblematic of calculated brutality as the actions of Santiago Meza Lopez, better known as El Pozolero. Operating in Tijuana during the 2000s under the orders of the Sinaloa cartel, he was responsible for the systematic disposal of human bodies using acid, a method that was both horrifying and alarmingly efficient. The nickname El Pozolero, which translates roughly to the stew maker, masks the grisly reality of his work. Victims, rivals, dissenters, or those unfortunate enough to be targeted by the cartel were placed into large vats where chemicals dissolved their remains. This method was designed to ensure complete elimination of physical evidence, reflecting the cartel's extreme focus on secrecy and operational control. The scale of his actions was staggering. Hundreds of people were reported to have been disposed of in this manner. While most criminal organizations rely on traditional methods of concealment, such as mass graves or dumping bodies in remote locations, the Sinaloa cartel's approach under El Pozolero demonstrated an unnerving level of planning and meticulousness, a chilling combination of efficiency and inhumanity. The discovery of these vats of dissolved bodies shocked both Mexico and the international community, highlighting not only the brutality of cartel violence, but also the challenges faced by law enforcement in investigating such crimes. Unlike shootings or public executions, where evidence remains visible, the chemical disposal of human remains made tracing victims and prosecuting perpetrators far more difficult. For the families of the disappeared, it represented a particularly cruel form of loss. Their loved ones were not only murdered, but effectively erased, leaving few traces and complicating efforts at closure or justice. The case became infamous not only for the scale and method of the killings, but also for the psychological impact it had on communities and authorities alike. It underscored the lengths to which cartels would go to maintain control, intimidate rivals, and eliminate perceived threats without drawing attention to themselves. El Pozolero's work serves as a stark example of how organized crime in Mexico has evolved beyond visible acts of violence to include highly secretive, methodical, and industrial forms of brutality. The case is also a reminder of the broader social and institutional consequences of cartel dominance, corruption, fear, and the erosion of public trust in law enforcement and governance. Beyond the immediate horror of his actions, the story of El Pozolero is emblematic of a larger system of violence that relies on dehumanization, intimidation, and the careful removal of evidence to perpetuate its operations. While media coverage often emphasizes the shock factor of his nickname or the grotesque details of body disposal, the more serious underlying reality is one of organized, calculated cruelty that challenges traditional notions of criminality and underscores the extreme danger posed by drug cartels. Ultimately, the case of El Pozolero is a sobering illustration of the extreme measures taken by criminal organizations to enforce power and control, and the devastating human cost of such actions. It is not merely a story of sensationalized violence. It is a grim reflection of systemic brutality, highlighting the intersection of criminal ingenuity and moral depravity. For Mexico, and for the global community, the legacy of these crimes serves as a reminder of the urgent need to address organized crime not only through law enforcement, but through comprehensive social, economic, and institutional strategies aimed at preventing the conditions that allow such extreme violence to flourish. It was September 1990 at Bootham Crescent, home of York City. The crowd buzzed with energy as the Minstermen faced Lincoln City in what seemed like an ordinary 4th Division match. On the pitch, 25-year-old striker David Longhurst sprinted across the field, doing what he loved most. He was the underdog every fan rooted for, chasing one last dream in the lower leagues of English football. Then, in an instant, everything changed. The ball had moved to the other side of the field. There was no challenge, no foul, no warning. David was standing alone when suddenly he staggered and collapsed. The stadium fell silent. For a few seconds, fans thought maybe he'd tripped. Maybe it was a cramp, but the way he fell, the stillness told a different story. Teammates rushed toward him. The referee waved frantically for the medics. Spectators looked on in horror as the young striker lay motionless on the turf. Within minutes, the ambulance arrived. Paramedics worked desperately to revive him. Players knelt and prayed. Some couldn't even look. He was rushed to the hospital, but he never made it. David John Longhurst was pronounced dead that afternoon. 25 years old, gone in the middle of a match. It was the first time a player had died during a football league game in 63 years. Doctors later confirmed the cause of a rare, undetected heart condition called cardiomyopathy, a disease that silently weakens the heart until it simply stops. To everyone watching, David looked fit and strong, but inside, something deadly had been hiding all along. For the world of lower league football, it was a brutal wake-up call. These weren't millionaire athletes with elite medical teams. They were working-class players giving everything for local pride. And now, one of them had died in front of thousands of horrified fans. News spread fast. On the radio, David's father, Vic, heard the devastating announcement while driving. "We were just sitting there trying to take it in," he later said. "It was devastating. There had been no contact, no warning. It was something you couldn't explain. At first, people assumed it was a heart attack, but the post-mortem revealed a genetic defect no regular checkup could have found. You have to have an ultrasonic scan for these things to show up," Vic explained. David had all the usual examinations, but nothing ever appeared. After his son's death, Vic made it his mission to campaign for better heart screening in sports for every athlete at every level. He warned that more lives could be saved with proper scans. When Fabrice Muamba collapsed in 2012 and survived, Vic's message echoed louder than ever. Doctors and charities pushed for mandatory screenings, citing Italy, where such measures had reduced sudden cardiac deaths by 90%. Yet in England, testing remained optional. For York City, the loss was deeply personal. David wasn't just another signing, he was their spark, their fighter. To honor him, the club renamed one of their stands the David Longhurst Stand, ensuring his name would live on in the place where he gave everything. On May 22, 1968, the USS Scorpion vanished in the Atlantic Ocean, taking with it all 99 sailors on board. Its disappearance remains one of the Cold War's most chilling mysteries, a submarine swallowed by the sea under circumstances that have never been fully explained. Was it a mechanical failure, a catastrophic accident, or something far more sinister? The truth has eluded the world for decades, leaving only speculation and the haunting silence of the deep. The Scorpion was a Skipjack-class nuclear-powered submarine, sleek and deadly, designed to shadow, hunt, and outmaneuver any adversary. Commissioned in 1960, it quickly earned a reputation for daring missions, including a legendary Northern Run, where it is said the crew observed a Soviet missile launch through the periscope, narrowly evading the Soviet Navy in icy northern waters. Its service record was distinguished, marked by commendations for both its commanding officer and crew, but beneath the polished exterior lay vulnerabilities that would later prove fatal. In 1967, the Scorpion entered the Norfolk Naval Shipyard for a refueling overhaul, but instead of a thorough restoration, it received only emergency repairs. Cold War pressures meant speed was valued over safety, and the full suite of subsafe modifications measures designed to prevent disasters like the loss of the USS Thresher was delayed or ignored. Crucial emergency systems were untested. Structural inspections were cut short. The submarine returned to sea armed but incomplete, a ticking time bomb under the guise of a fully operational nuclear vessel. By May 1968, the Scorpion was on its final mission. It had departed the Mediterranean, briefly stopping at Naval Station Rota in Spain before heading west across the Atlantic. The crew had dropped off 2 sailors for personal emergencies, unaware that the ocean itself was about to claim them. On board, minor mechanical problems, freon leaks, electrical fires hinted at the submarine's fragility, but nothing prepared the Navy for what was about to happen. The last communications from Scorpion were brief, garbled radio messages sent to Rota, warning of a Soviet submarine task force ahead. It was closing in at a steady 15 knots, depth at 350 feet, preparing to observe, then silence. The submarine failed to arrive in Norfolk, and a massive search began. 55 ships and 35 aircraft scoured the Atlantic, but the ocean kept its secret. Only days later, fragments of the Scorpion were discovered at the bottom of the sea, more than 9,800 feet deep, broken into pieces, its hull crushed by the immense pressure of the Atlantic. Investigations were inconclusive. The Navy launched multiple inquiries, analyzing hydroacoustic signals and the wreckage itself. Some experts suggested a torpedo had detonated inside the submarine. Others argued hydrogen buildup during battery charging could have triggered a devastating explosion. A malfunctioning trash disposal unit, structural failures, even a Soviet attack have all been proposed. Theories abound, each more chilling than the last, that the crew was caught in a trap, or that a hot-running torpedo turned on its own vessel. Yet, no single explanation can fully account for the horror, the speed, and the totality of the loss. The wreck itself tells a story of violent destruction. The bow dug a trench into the seabed, the sail torn free, compartments telescoped and crushed, the torpedo room twisted but largely intact. Deep-sea photographs reveal the broken propulsion shaft lying on the ocean floor, a silent testament to forces no human could survive. Even today, the Scorpion rests undisturbed in its grave, its reactor and nuclear weapons intact, the surrounding waters free of radiation, as if the ocean itself is protecting the secrets of that night. Families of the lost sailors and historians alike have pressed for answers, even calling for the investigation to be reopened decades later. Yet the U.S. Navy has held firm, leaving the final chapter of the Scorpion story unwritten, a ghostly reminder of the dangers lurking beneath the waves during the height of the Cold War. Some claim the truth is hidden in secret files, others that the Soviets themselves might have been involved, retaliating for earlier submarine losses. Every theory is dark, every hypothesis terrifying, and the silence of the Atlantic remains the ultimate witness. The story of the Scorpion isn't just a tale of a submarine lost at sea. It's a chilling reminder that the ocean holds secrets far beyond human understanding, that the Cold War was fought in shadowed depths as much as on land, and that sometimes, no matter how advanced the technology or skilled the crew, the sea is merciless. The Scorpion vanished quietly, leaving only questions, fear, and a legacy that haunts every sailor who ever takes the plunge into the unknown. It's a normal day in Uruapan, Michoacan, a city known for its vibrant markets, bustling streets, and the sweet aroma of fresh fruit. But in 2019, the city became the unwilling stage for a chilling performance, one that nobody would forget. The Jalisco New Generation Cartel, CJNG, a name that had been whispered in fear across Mexico, decided to make an unforgettable statement. 19 victims, yes, 19 were brutally killed, some hanging lifelessly from a bridge like grotesque ornaments, while others were dismembered and left with banners that screamed warnings to rival cartels. It was horror, delivered with cold, calculated theatrics. The bridge, a structure that usually symbolized connection and passage, was transformed into a stage of psychological warfare, a grim reminder of the ruthless power these cartels wield. Now, don't get me wrong, this isn't a horror movie plot, even though it reads like one. This was real life, with real victims and families forever scarred. The CJNG's goal was clear: intimidation through spectacle. By publicly displaying such grotesque violence, they weren't just killing people. They were sending a message to anyone thinking of crossing them. Rival cartels, local authorities, even ordinary citizens, it was all warning. This is what happens when you stand in our way. And the bridge, that became more than a bridge. It became a symbol of fear, a monument to the extremes of cartel brutality. But here's the twisted part that makes this incident so infamous. It wasn't just about terror, it was about control. Mexican cartels like the CJNG operate in a world where territory and reputation are everything. Showing dominance publicly is a strategic move. Hanging bodies in a visible spot isn't just cruelty, it's a power play, a psychological tool designed to shake rivals to their core and remind locals who really calls the shots. The banners left behind weren't random scribbles. They were threats, signatures of terror, and statements of authority. In essence, it was performance art for intimidation, but one where the canvas was human life and the brush strokes were unspeakably violent. The scale of the Uruapan hangings also shocked Mexico and the world because it highlighted a larger trend. Cartel violence isn't just secretive anymore. It's public, brutal, and theatrical. There's a calculated logic behind it, a dark kind of marketing strategy where fear itself becomes currency. And it works. People talk, news spreads, rival gangs rethink moves, citizens live in constant caution. It's horrific, but disturbingly effective. And yet, amid all this darkness, there's a grim reality we can't ignore: the human cost. Families lost loved ones, communities were terrorized, and a city's sense of safety was ripped apart. Behind the banners and the spectacle were 19 lives extinguished, each with a story, a family, and a life that ended far too soon. The bridge hangings were a chilling reminder that cartel wars are not abstract. They are intensely personal and devastating. So, while we can describe the CJNG's actions as strategic, theatrical, or even organized, the underlying truth remains simple and tragic. This was murder on a public stage, a deliberate act meant to terrify and control, and a stark illustration of how cartel violence has evolved into something that's as psychological as it is physical. Uruapan's bridge may have stood still, but in 2019, it became a haunting symbol of fear, power, and the chilling lengths to which organized crime will go to dominate. It was a cold afternoon on December 29, 2007, at Fir Park, home of Motherwell Football Club. The stands were alive with noise, scarves waving, fans bundled up against the Scottish winter. Their captain, Phil O'Donnell, a man who had spent nearly 2 decades earning respect on and off the pitch, was leading from the front, as always, calm, composed, and committed. The match against Dundee United seemed like any other day in the Scottish Premier League. Nothing unusual, nothing foreboding. Motherwell were in control, the game winding toward its end. Then, in a moment no one could have predicted, everything changed. As the fourth official prepared to raise his board for a substitution, O'Donnell began to slow down. He looked pale, unsteady. Just as he was about to be replaced, he staggered and collapsed. For a few seconds, the crowd went silent, the kind of silence that grips an entire stadium when something feels terribly wrong. Players froze in disbelief before rushing toward him. Medics sprinted onto the pitch. The atmosphere turned from routine to panic in an instant. Fans watched in horror as their captain and their hero lay motionless on the turf he had graced for years. Both Motherwell and Dundee United doctors worked desperately to revive him, performing CPR as the crowd prayed, some crying openly in the stands. The minutes stretched on like hours. Then, the the stretcher came out. As he was carried away to the ambulance, supporters rose to their feet, clapping, whispering his name, hoping he would be okay. But at 5:18 p.m., the news came. Philip O'Donnell had died. He was just 35 years old. The post-mortem revealed heart failure in the left ventricle. The part of the heart that pumps oxygen-rich blood had simply stopped. It was the kind of silent killer no one sees coming, not even in a professional athlete who seemed the picture of fitness. For the Motherwell faithful, it was unbearable. Phil wasn't just their captain, he was one of them. Born in Bellshill, just a few miles away, he'd started with the club as a teenager, scoring in their 1991 Scottish Cup final victory and earning praise for his bravery and spirit. He had gone on to play for Celtic and Sheffield Wednesday before coming home not just to play, but to lead. He was Uncle Phil to his younger teammates, a mentor to many, and the heart of the dressing room. In the days that followed, Scotland mourned. Fans from across the country, even rival clubs, laid scarves, shirts, flowers, and handwritten notes outside Fir Park. Tributes poured in from around the world. The Scottish Premier League postponed Motherwell's next matches out of respect, and even Celtic and Rangers' bitter rivals agreed to delay their derby game to honor him. Across the border, English clubs paid their own tributes. Players wore black armbands. Stadiums fell silent. Everton's James McFadden, once O'Donnell's teammate, scored and pointed toward the sky, eyes filled with tears. It wasn't just Scotland that grieved. Messages came from Spain, from Sevilla, a club that had suffered the same heartbreak months earlier when Antonio Puerta had collapsed and died. Sevilla's director of football sent words of comfort, saying, "We know how terrible this pain is. Our hearts are with Motherwell." For his funeral, thousands gathered at St. Mary's Church in Hamilton. Fans, players, officials, and families united in grief. His teammates carried his coffin, their captain, one final time, as the town fell silent. In the months that followed, Motherwell made sure his legacy would never fade. The club renamed its main stand the Phil O'Donnell Stand, a permanent reminder of the man who gave his all for the badge. His signature was stitched into every player's jersey for the rest of the season, and in 2011, a stainless steel memorial was erected outside the stadium, a place where fans could come to remember. But the tributes didn't end there. On May 25, 2008, Celtic Park hosted a special match in his honor, a celebration of his life as much as a farewell. Former teammates and friends filled the pitch. Legends like Henrik Larsson returned. 60,000 fans filled the stands, singing his name. The match ended 5-1, but the score didn't matter. What mattered was the unity, the love, the shared grief turned into remembrance. Every year since, on December 29th, people walk from Fir Park to Celtic Park, the journey between two of his football homes. It's a walk of respect, of remembrance, and of hope, raising money for heart charities and keeping Phil's memory alive. Even years later, his influence hasn't faded. His nephew, David Clarkson, carried his legacy on the pitch, wearing Phil's number 10 shirt until his own departure, a number that has never been worn again at Motherwell. On the morning of August 12, 2000, deep in the icy waters of the Barents Sea, the Russian nuclear-powered submarine K-141 Kursk, a marvel of Cold War engineering, met a fate that would shock the world. Known as an Oscar II-class submarine, Kursk was a behemoth built to carry a deadly arsenal capable of taking out an entire aircraft carrier group. It was a floating fortress, bristling with 24 supersonic cruise missiles and torpedoes, each armed with warheads that could obliterate ships with terrifying precision. Yet, on that fateful day, all of that power would be rendered tragically useless. Kursk had been part of the Northern Fleet for only a few years, and despite its advanced design, reinforced hulls, stealth technology, and the ability to remain submerged for months, its crew had little time to truly master the vessel. The fleet had been underfunded and neglected during the chaotic 1990s, and many sailors were inexperienced. Still, pride swelled as Kursk prepared to join the largest Russian naval exercise in a decade, Summer X, alongside 30 other ships. The crew had been celebrated as the best in the fleet, confident in their skill, unaware of the silent danger lurking within their own submarine. It began as a routine. Kursk successfully fired a Granite missile with a dummy warhead, a display of precision. But on August 12th, while preparing to fire practice torpedoes at the massive battlecruiser Pyotr Veliky, disaster struck. At 11:28 local time, the first explosion tore through the forward torpedo room. The source, a faulty hydrogen peroxide-fueled Type 65 torpedo. High-test peroxide, a volatile propellant, leaked through a tiny crack. When it met a catalyst, it expanded violently, igniting kerosene fuel, producing a blast equivalent to hundreds of kilograms of TNT. The force was catastrophic, ripping through the submarine's hull and sending a second, far larger explosion in its wake, 3 to 7 tons of TNT equivalent obliterating compartments, and leaving the vessel broken and flooded at the bottom of the sea, 108 meters down, 135 kilometers from Severomorsk. In the chaos that followed, the first 3 compartments were instantly destroyed. Only 23 sailors managed to survive initially, trapped in the 9th compartment at the stern. Captain Lieutenant Dmitry Kolesnikov penned a note listing those who had survived the initial blasts, a haunting record of lives clinging to hope amid the cold, dark steel coffin beneath the waves. The submarine carried chemical oxygen generators meant to provide breathable air, but seawater contamination turned them into deadly flash fires, consuming what little oxygen remained. Survivors briefly plunged under waist-deep water to escape the flames, but suffocation and fire claimed them all. Outside, the world waited and watched, helpless. Russia refused offers of aid from the British and Norwegian navies in the initial hours, and rescue operations were plagued by delay and bureaucratic missteps. President Vladimir Putin, only 4 months into office, was on holiday at a Black Sea resort. Though informed immediately of the disaster, he waited 5 days before returning, trusting the Navy's assurances that rescue efforts were underway. The public saw inaction, a nation in suspense and outrage as a hope dwindled for the trapped sailors. The aftermath was harrowing. When divers finally reached the submarine on August 21st, they discovered the grim reality of Kolesnikov's note: the burned compartments, the shattered vessel. Every one of the 118 men aboard had perished. The world was left grappling with images of a proud, deadly submarine reduced to a tomb beneath the waves, and with questions of how politics and pride had compounded the tragedy. Salvage operations began, a monumental task. Dutch companies Mammoet and Smit International undertook the careful work of raising Kursk. The bow, destroyed in the initial explosion, was cut away using a tungsten carbide cable, avoiding sparks that could ignite lingering gases. The submarine was towed to Severomorsk, stripped of its reactor fuel, while fragments of torpedoes were destroyed to prevent further danger. Official investigations concluded that the disaster stemmed from the torpedo explosion, but alternative explanations emerged. Many pointed to human error, insufficient training, poor maintenance, and flawed manuals. The crew had never been properly trained to handle such volatile torpedoes. A single misstep, a faulty weld, an inexperienced hand, an overlooked safety check set off a chain reaction that turned Kursk from a weapon of war into a coffin of steel and fire. On August 25, 2011, the city of Monterrey, one of Mexico's most developed and prosperous urban centers, experienced a tragedy that shook the nation and the world. The Casino Royale, a place where people went to relax, gamble, and spend an evening with friends, became the site of one of the deadliest civilian attacks in Mexico's modern history. That afternoon, a group of armed men associated with the Los Zetas cartel stormed the casino, not with the intent to rob, but to punish. They carried gasoline cans and weapons, forcing their way in and quickly turning what should have been a night of entertainment into a scene of horror and terror. People inside initially thought it was a robbery or some prank, but the attackers' true purpose soon became clear. Flames engulfed the building, thick smoke spread, and chaos erupted. In a matter of minutes, 52 people lost their lives, trapped inside the burning structure, including employees and patrons who had done nothing more than spend an evening at the casino. The motive behind this attack was chillingly calculated. The casino's owners had reportedly refused to pay quota, or protection money, demanded by Los Zetas. In the brutal logic of the cartel, non-compliance was unacceptable. The fire was not a random act of violence. It was a deliberate message of intimidation, meant to show that defiance would be met with the harshest possible punishment. Unlike a typical territorial clash between rival gangs, this attack targeted civilians, demonstrating how cartels had escalated their methods to maintain control and instill fear. The scale and audacity of the attack shocked Mexico and drew international attention. Monterrey, known for its thriving economy, universities, and industrial significance, had never witnessed such extreme violence directed at ordinary citizens. The image of a modern city reduced to a scene of smoke, fire, and death challenged the perception that cartel violence only affected border towns or remote regions. This attack underlined a disturbing truth. In Mexico's drug war, no place was truly safe, and the consequences of standing up to a cartel could be catastrophic. In the aftermath, authorities arrested several individuals connected to the crime, but questions remained about the role of corruption, complicity, and the limits of law enforcement in addressing cartel violence. The victims' families were left to grapple with unimaginable loss, while the nation mourned a tragedy that could have been avoided if extortion and intimidation had been confronted more effectively. The president at the time, Felipe Calderón, called the attack an act of terrorism, a rare acknowledgement that the violence was not merely criminal but designed to terrorize the population. The Monterrey casino attack has since become a symbol of the human cost of Mexico's drug war. It highlighted the extreme measures cartels were willing to take to enforce their will, the vulnerability of civilians, and the challenges faced by authorities in protecting citizens from organized crime. While buildings were rebuilt and some perpetrators brought to justice, the psychological scars remain. For many, the attack is a reminder of how violence can erupt in the most unexpected places, turning everyday life into a battlefield. Ultimately, this tragedy emphasizes that cartel influence is not just a problem of drugs or turf. It is a systematic threat to society, where fear is a weapon and human lives can be destroyed for defiance. The Casino Royale fire is remembered not only for its devastating death toll, but also as a stark warning about the reach and brutality of organized crime in Mexico, and the urgent need to protect ordinary citizens from becoming victims of such unthinkable violence. It was supposed to be just another Sunday night in Portuguese football. January 25, 2004, Vitória de Guimarães versus Benfica, a normal league fixture, broadcast live to millions across the country. The air was crisp, the crowd loud, and Benfica's young Hungarian striker Miklós "Miki" Fejér was ready to make an impact. He came on as a substitute in the second half, full of energy, his trademark grin lighting up the field. He even set up the only goal of the match, a perfect assist that seemed to seal a quiet victory for Benfica. But as the game ticked into injury time, something unthinkable happened. The referee raised a yellow card. Fejér smiled, tilted his head down, hands on his knees, and then, suddenly, without warning, he fell backwards. For a few seconds, the world stood still. Players from both teams froze, unsure if it was a prank, a feint, or something worse. Then came the panic. Teammates rushed to him. One lifted his head, another screamed for help. The stadium, moments earlier filled with chants, turned eerily silent as Fejér lay motionless on the wet grass. The medics stormed onto the pitch. CPR began immediately. Players knelt in prayer. Others turned away, tears already streaming down their faces. Benfica's coach, José Antonio Camacho, broke down on the sideline. Cameras continued to roll, the horror unfolding live on national television. For a brief moment, there was hope. The medical team managed to get a response, and as Fejér was stretchered off the field, fans clung to the belief that he would recover. But within hours, the devastating news broke. Miklós Fejér was gone, just 24 years old. The autopsy would later confirm what no one could have predicted: cardiac arrhythmia caused by hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, a hidden heart condition that strikes without warning. His heart had simply given out in the middle of the game. It was a cruel, haunting moment. Fejér wasn't just a footballer, he was a symbol of joy, passion, and youthful promise. To watch someone so full of life collapse and never rise again shook the entire world of football. The image of his final smile just seconds before he fell burned itself into history. His death sent shockwaves far beyond Portugal. In the following days, fans filled the stands with flowers, candles, and scarves. Benfica retired his number 29 shirt, ensuring no player would ever wear it again. Rivals put aside differences, and Porto's staff, including Jose Mourinho, personally paid their respects. At Benfica's Estadio da Luz, thousands came to see his body before it was flown home to Hungary for burial. And even there, the mourning didn't stop. The entire Benfica squad, along with the club's president and manager, traveled to Hungary to honor him, presenting his parents with a league championship medal their son never got to hold. The team dedicated their cup win to his memory. For the rest of that season, every Benfica goal, every cheer, every celebration carried his spirit. Years later, Hungary's national team would return to Lisbon to lay a wreath beside his bust, and on what would have been his 43rd birthday, another tribute was held at the very stadium where his heart stopped. Time passed, but the image never faded. That smile, that collapse, the tears, the disbelief.